Claim the Federal Trade Commission should bring this to the federal court to Amazon for violation of the claim that by leveraging the cross-sector advantage of vertical integration, predatory pricing for unfair employer practices and compensation, safety, collective bargaining, organization, retaliation, and national labor relations. Board should rule in favor of the plaintiffs of the 23 open cases against Amazon with the court opinion sustaining decisions based on expanded interpretation of the claim that including triple penalties for each individual case and the compensation, equity, or predatory pricing. Coin antitrust is based on neoliberal model consumer welfare that exacerbates inequality results in digital segregation society. Topic 21. Antitrust policies, political antitrust theory, 1970s relied heavily on pursuit of economic efficiency, offering citizens the economic surplus and consumer welfare theory. The consumer welfare theory has led to the concentration of political agenda by economic groups interfering with the market, revisiting the close of competition policy, obliterating them for the more consistent decision, which inherited the bias and towards the concentrated market, limitation of competition policy and measures of the prices of the operations has restricted the consumer welfare to filling the prices. The definition of consumer setting and does not embrace the values of our time, failing to give the attention those who remain invisible to standard model citizen paradigm of minorities have not been addressed. The further they fall from the standard model citizen, the less of the left for them. Society falls twice by ignoring them, the second by overcharging them. Focus on economic efficiency and scientific progress alone does not prove pernicious or vicious to them. Critical view is also interested in seeking human emancipation, circumstances, domination in the person. Next. The first step is to deal with the unlimited growth such as Amazon, which strives by controlling infrastructure and vertical integration as well as establishing predatory pricing through disproportionate low working compensation, old work, and that old work competition, con 17. President being a larger growing the share of the comments share of comments are coming in because it's Italian like e-commerce and Amazon. Amazon's beer strategy to current market dominance and pose anti-competitive concern. The consumer welfare framework is antitrust fails to recognize concerns are heightened. First, the economics of platforms incentivize pursuit of growing over the profits and predatory pricing highly even exists in the doctrine teaching irrational, restoring the traditional antitrust principles agree a presumption of predation and ban for the integration by dominant players could maintain the competition of these markets. As Amazon continues to build deep in its existing control the key infrastructure to reach new lines of business, dominance demands of scrutiny to provide antitrust and competition policy platform. Markets should be guided by two cuts. The first are legal framework after the realities of how dominant platforms exercise the power in the internet economy. And second, how forms and degree should the law identify their competition. When considering these, we risk permitting the growth of powers that we oppose. Next, the chair of the FTC has already articulated grounds for predatory pricing against Amazon, but existing consumer welfare standards are insufficient and require new standards to leverage actual restrictions on predatory pricing. Clause 17. Predatory pricing remains illegal, extremely difficult to win predatory pricing claims because courts now will require proof that alleged predator would be able to raise prices and recoup losses. Several millions of several militate the favor and the presumption of predation in such cases, which consumer welfare framework and these shall include the degradation of product quality and sapping diversity of choice on terms by rights from Amazon, and the bargaining to extract better the terms producers and suppliers, and the potential harms to include lower income and wages and employees and lower rates in new businesses, lower results in local ownership outside the political economic control of the hands of the few. Supreme Court has not addressed the issues, but appellate courts have average variable costs and the right metric. Next. Growing monopoly powers allow employers to suppress wages and lead to non-complete agreements that force workers onto acceptable wages. Low wages create the opportunity of anti-competitive pricing through artificial low labor costs. Now to 21. Increases in adjusted the wage and the average of work have risen by 3% in 1970. That we can actually decline for the bottom fifth. The company now. Town is a familiar historical situation which employers hold cars in which it comes to setting wages. Since the towns that one employer, the workers cannot leave for better pay without uprooting their families, in which they tend not to do. Yet in another shows the labor market of so-called non-compete agreement, which are far from leveling. Americans realize that these agreements prohibit workers to leave from the working of the competitor from their former employer. There are other subtle ways that employers gain the labor market difference. Employers often working at the house and leave policies, workplace conditions, and workers tend to choose whose conditions the personal family situation. A wave of metric producers or corporations greater labor market power for a time. Economics believe that labor markets were nonetheless competitive, but the conventional wisdom was vaporized from the series empirical studies that suggest the labor market is real and significant. Next, market monopolies have led to labor monopolies, which led to stagnant wages, holding on paying, killing labor share overall. On COVID-18, last year researchers found that nearly 1 in 5 workers, or almost 30 million people, are subject to non-compete agreements, including 40% of 40 who make 40,000 less year. These kind of agreements impose only and reduce job search competition would otherwise increase worker wages, where they black the companies. Other franchise or illegal monopoly allows a company that has eaten the entire industry and fixes price for consumer traveling the higher they would believe, and other companies were able to compete in the same market at lower prices. Companies get away with forcing employees in the same compete agreements, which help their wages go down because they are so dominant. Their their own initiatives. Indeed, nearly 2/3 of the checked applicants signed non-compete agreements when they have hired or had no job, other job opportunities. A plausible reason for why productivity has become unrooted in the worker pay that American firms are enjoying the strong monopoly power since countries facing place a decline in labor share. That is the share of the money that workers receive in their companies is holds down the work next to the worker pay. Next, don't believe the corporate promotional hype at Amazon working conditions are brutal and inhumane, as evidence high workers turn on a few bathroom breaks, high rates of injury claims 21. Harvard study claims that we are about workers when a consumer-driven culture, cheap sales, and take precedence over what goes behind the scenes. The turnover at Amazon is much higher than any other companies. An annual rate of 150 per warehouse worker who physically demanding repetitive immense labor, stay motivated after day, year after year, even harder, optimistic. Doesn't seem much an upward advancements are the rising glue in the working conditions that too few bathroom breaks, which are all executive time, executive productivity goes in unsafe working environment. Amazon employs 1 million workers, making the second largest in the U.S. About 40% of work-related injuries at Amazon are Spain's initiative from repetitive accident. One of the most dystopian moves yet. Amazon included tiny booths where it's working warehouse employees in a monumentary escaping job and bullying many employees, saying they don't feel like they have enough time to even use the bathroom. Next, Amazon has been severely anti-union, leaving little protection. These labor marches are bargaining sanctions of workers since 2021. Amazon launched an aggressive anti-union ahead of the union election. Amazon strongly encouraged workers to vote against the union through tech messaging, the website, and several anti-union captives and audience from the warehouse. Cut the card there. On to the next. Next, unions are critical internal to anti-capitalist roots under 21. The Marx and Engels understood that unions are essential to the working class formation because under capitalism, the system of labor where individual workers understand the labor and employed and for wages and fragment relations between workers and make them compete with each other as described in the Communist Manifesto that bourgeois has no love the nexus between the man and men and naked self-interest in the callous campaign, leaving workers exposed to all the business competition, all the fluctuations of the market while workers organized based on a collective identity such as ethnicity, religion, or only unions unite as workers against the source and exploitation of the bourgeois. Unions serve an organized agent for superseding them in the labor and in capital rule. Next, use monopolies, block climate change bills to allow their continue harmful environmental impacts beyond 21. Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft is in their back in the business and fighting the landmark climate despite their own promise that the proposal $3.5 trillion bill put on by the Democrats will contain the unprecedented amounts of drop down planet heating. The recognizing that has been called the most significant climate change in our country's history. Major corporations tell us how they are committed to the climate crisis, but there's a sustainable future beyond global. There are every industry that continue fighting tooth and nail to stop the biggest climate change ever. As the results of major attempted climate legislation, more than a decade of the bill comes at a time when scientists warn that the world is rapidly running out of time to avoid a catastrophic climate change. Next, cut the card there onto the next. Amazon's one-day shipping is convenient and terrible for the environment. Under 19. The e-commerce giant said that it's working on offering one-day shipping and prime customers by slashing the delivery time in half. It's also promised going to have a huge impact on the environment. This move seems to predicate on the Amazon's core principle of consumer obsession. The current delivery times they're pulling that sounds like bad, but will likely at expense of the environment. Freight vehicles are responsible for nearly 1/3 of the carbon footprint in transportation category. Cut the card there onto the next. Now is the key time to reshape the industry, practice forefront and different economic priorities and preserve environment while possible. Nothing less than a total restructuring while address the current environmental harms which have been facilitated to of economic growth. Global 16. Dominant focus in the fight in the economic deficit deployment has been sensitive in missing the social ecological deficit and thereby failing to address the persistent problems in these areas can be argued by the short-term strategy and the proper and literally on the maximum system. Path-dependent development and optimizing the existing situation and structure by inevitably lead to the recurring crisis and ultimately more destructive and shockwise in the structural change in the Cuban regime. This economic crisis might be considered the phase in a broader economic transition in the isolation of the relatively short time frame. But an intrinsic part of perhaps insisting on deeply under the structural and societal change over the long term. Alright, so yeah, to the last card, I got to long term.
Here's a marked off before we start CEDA.
Yeah. just saving them right now. That should be sent.
Okay, ready for this?
Yes.
Alright, 3, 2, 1. Y'all change the CWS?
Sorry, again?
Do you guys change the CWS?
We expand the current antitrust law, which is the claim there.
So how does that change the CWS?
We're not explicitly advocating for a new standard to replace anything like the CWS. What we're advocating for is a push towards the Clayton Act. There's an expansion of the Clayton Act towards something more similar to a worker welfare standard. We're not explicitly advocating for a replacement of it.
Y'all's common evidence says that y'all need to change the CWS in order to solve for like labor laws and also predatory pricing. So like it says within your evidence, so y'all need to change the CWS to access.
Well, no, the evidence specifically says that the Commonwealth Standard creates the Commonwealth Standard theory, and that is that aligns with the Clayton Act, which is why you need to be able to expand the Clayton Act so that we can punish against those who do anti-union or predatory pricing to be able to combat that the theory of the Commonwealth Standard.
What y'all are saying are that unions are key to stop Amazon from engaging in these behaviors?
What we're saying is that what we're doing through our plan is setting a precedent, and Amazon, who has the second largest amount of employees, what we're doing is setting the precedents that no company, going specifically for Amazon, but no company are going to be able to take any anti-union actions, so that those unions will be able to overcome these companies who continue to take advantage of them to allow the anti-capitalist revolution to happen.
How does it set a precedent?
Again, because what we're doing is that we're expanding the current, again, due to 23 cases that are happening now, these cases are all going to be combined to one. But currently, the Clayton Act does not allow any consequences for those who take action in predatory pricing or in any kind of anti-union action. So what we're doing is that these 23 cases that are happening now, we're combining them into one to be able to expand the Clayton Act, and that is setting the precedence that those who take any kind of
Alright, that's good. Moving on to the environment advantage on your village card, it says that other monopolies like Microsoft, Disney, those companies are also like blocking climate bills. So how do you guys solve for them?
Again, so we solve for them because what we're doing, so like certain companies like Amazon or Apple who have workers within them, for example, Apple or Microsoft or Disney don't have any unions in them because they're currently anti-union. So by allowing unions to have what we would talk about under 2AC,
Okay,
it would
so
cause
unions are
it would cause an economic decline. And that right there, that economic decline will allow them to be weakened.
So
So that they won't.
econ collapse?
We want an econ collapse, yes.
Okay. And what about the Amazon union in the SQL?
The Amazon union in the skull is currently from one union in Staten Island, but think about how long that took. You need a plan to be able to speed that up so that it's spread everywhere.
Okay. I am sending over the one in Steam. Has everyone received it?
I still got it.
Okay, so all the judges are good? Okay, cool. And
Yeah,
y'all are good?
yeah, I'm still.
Okay, go. Yeah. Okay.
Are we gonna go over?
Yes, of course. So it'll be 5 off cases in order, the one he's saying. So like their observation one, their like advantage, I don't know what it's called, like the environment stuff. Good.
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and get started. First off, only cases that remove antitrust exemptions or topical scope is defined by exemptions and immunities. Cruise at all 19. Then becomes the scope of antitrust laws addressed in the scope of antitrust laws. The scope is defined in terms of exemptions and immunities, statutory and non-statutory doctrines, directly affect application and extent of the laws. And expand must make more expensive, not merely clarify existing principles. That's Hatter Junior 90. To merely clarify existing law, in this case, does not support that the digest states that it will expand the definition and indicate a change in law rather than restatement of existing law. And the act is intensified the application of antitrust to already covered activities. It does not curtail an exemption or immunity. Vote neg. Eliminating exemptions and immunities provides a limited and predictable basis for private and focused debates on the balance between antitrust regulation and ensuring conceptual unity. One limits within literature defined case laws. Any other interval laws for infinite absence, new standards, or increased enforcement in an area. 2. Ground. Existing exemptions have already been researched and debated in literature. Must focus on real-world education and ensure that ground. Case 2. Counterclaim. The Department of Justice brings suit in federal court against Amazon for violations including that by leveraging cross-sector advantages, vertical integration, predatory pricing, employment practices, and competition safety, and collective bargaining, organizing, retaliation, and from the National Labor Relations Board to rule in favor of plaintiffs that all open 23 cases against Amazon court opinions, standing decision based on expanded interpreted including trouble penalties, pretended location, compensation, inequity, or predatory pricing. DOJ is the antitrust. That's Jones 21. Antitrust forces consult condemnating to one top of cases, top legal decisions repeatedly ranked them among antitrust luminaries. Most importantly, years before national reckoning, counter warrant history confirms the helm of antitrust defense true anti-monopolists can deliver huge evidence or businesses that is concert. And off case 3, FTC. The FTC will enforce right to repair now, prevents agricultural decline. That's midterm 21. To promote competition, the FTC and repair monopolies is contentious on monopolies ground until productivity and innovation result in a right to repair and lower costs for growth. Farmers became experts that has broken down costs can be significant by limiting access. Manufacturers cut the labor and harvest and busy periods to equipment immobilized for hours can cost 1,000. FTC limited manufacturers for restricting ability to use repairs. And the plan turns off this 9/20. The agency that launched an antitrust is strapped for cash. Leaders discuss shrinking staff and warn against taking more cases. Agency faced belt tightening to cut costs and fewer cases. Tripping litigation must be on the table. The FTC may not cash one case or take on companies. And extinction. That's Cast Law 18. U.S. faces wars, ISIS, Korea, nuclear, Iranian competition with Russia, China, famine, and migration create incubators for extremist factions. Food is imperative. Reliable supplies and prices produce stable countries and security. American ag has always been a sector that values initiative, unleashing vitality with innovation, farmers leverage, expertise, and manage risks. And on case 4, midterm C. Dims hold the Senate, alter 211. Dims curling up the fetal position. These snowflakes need to listen to share, snap out of it. James 6 is becoming a genuine wedge issue. Official position of the GOP is attack on capital is legitimate. Astonishing gap. Transform midterm from a referendum on Biden to one of nuttiness and questions for swing voters. You really want this crazy dictator pardoning fascists. Pardons in midterms 1974. Dims wanted no landslide, and even without Biden, surge Washington today look fairly good. In Senate, Republicans are vulnerable. Pandemic is receding. Dog goes shattered records. President looks strong on forces killed leader of ISIS and NATO united. And the plan angers donors, causing Dem losses. That's short 21. Parties become dependent upon campaign contributions from a full of professionals with concrete financial stake in lax antitrust supports by 12 M&A professionals donating more than $30 million in federal elections. Dems garner majority 10 out of 18 elections. Slightly, Dems perform comparably in industry as a whole. Decision to pursue onerous regulation cannot start consequences. Credit in 2010 decision to aggressively regulate Wall Street. And senators only get certified because they're willing to power. They come around if they can win. Ferris 21. It is critical Dems clean the one branch of Congress, the GOP gambit to augment the vote and throw elections in hospital because they need the majority in Congress to toss out votes from a state. A majority of Republican senators never signed on. Must be attributed to futility. If Republicans had votes, senators who refused would certainly have come around if they believed that could help secure another term for Trump. And the impact of civil war and global conflict. That's Ethan 21. Chaos and military put all superiors who chilled our bones in a coup succeeding next time. Military breakdown nearing political breakdowns very real. On January 6, 1 and 10 charges had a surface record refusing refusing the order from Biden. Potential for total breakdown of chain of command is significant. Competing commanders in chief. Trump had a shadow government without politics illegally installing the losing candidate. Contested elections some follow the rightful commander in chief. Others Trump arms not secured could lead to civil war, but military help with any one of our enemies can take advantage once again all at assault. And on case 5, Counterclaim. State of Delaware should bring in suit in federal court against Amazon for violations of the Clinton Act by leveraging cross-sector advantage, vertical integration, predatory pricing from unfair employment practices and compensation safety, collective bargaining, organized retaliations, and National Labor Relations Board for rule in favor of plaintiffs in all 23 of the cases against Amazon. Court opinions the standing decision to make on expanded interpretation of the Clinton Act, including triple penalties for each individual case, compensation inequity, and predatory pricing immediately revoke the corporate charges of companies which do not comply, and Lockering Corporation for Delaware firms outside the state for a minimum of 3 years to enforce compliance. And Delaware can revoke corporate charters for abuse effectively any companies if they do not comply. That's Demlosky 20. that Delaware AG may request a solution of a business entity authority to initiate proceedings to revoke the charter of Delaware corporations. The AG petition to corporate dissolution of the corporations containing to abuse authority. And Delaware avoids trade-off in politics and causes follow-on. That's row 12. Delaware and DC are principal jurisdictions making corporate law. Each makes major rules, lawmaking efforts intact. Delaware's position can affect Washington. The court positions itself away from preference to minimize the chance that Congress overturn decisions. Action is costly for Congress. ABC, Congress will do nothing. This can illustrate one dimension of Delaware-Washington interaction after the 08 election. Delaware produced a moderate statute having an impact on Washington and affect Washington's decision-making. And on case observation 1. The plan is to change the CWS, abandon recoupment or introduce a presumption of predation. Can't set a real precedent or something on the person or their impacts. There are academic degrees. Predatory pricing is extremely difficult. One person require proof the alleged predator would be able to raise price and recoup losses. Revising predatory pricing doctrine required abandoning the recoupment doctrine. A competition-based approach might also consider introducing a presumption of predation for dominant offers to become pricing products below cost. Presumption of predation would involve in defining when a price is below cost is subject to much debate. And of course, won't rule against Amazon for predatory prices. That's Con 17. Evidence of the low-cost pricing is not alone sufficient to prevent interference of probable recoupment and injury to competition. Justice Kennedy wrote the plaintiff must demonstrate likelihood that the scheme caused the rising price to above competitive level to compensate for the amount expended. Requirement of net recoupment has been placed under dividend center for presumed direct profit maximization singular goal. Harms only from predatory pricing results in higher prices. The court will have concern of including an aversion long term that exploit their state. Even if they try, Amazon won't be deterred. It's still a huge post-plan. That's Tron 21. Amazon do not need to use predatory pricing. Its unique business model has tremendous force and speed precisely because it creates value for both shareholders and competitors. And the particularly research exposed inadequacies of current regulatory approaches to pricing and other evident harms to the consumer are no longer useful tests for any competitive behavior and just laws must shift to new, more real-time school of thought. And on labor. Their calling evidence says Amazon bad, not how the plan solves, but against the negative presumption. And unions don't solve. Their solvency currently recreating it at 120. Unions were a partial and perfect vehicle for doing so for two reasons. First, unions fundamentally defensive role meant they have limited themselves to guerrilla war against the effect of the existing system and instead of simultaneously trying to change it from the country. And even if you buy that, Amazon Union solves the impact now, limit before court. Amazon Union would win after a new wave scrutiny against its labor practices. This will be a big. They want an economy that works for all. This will be a victory for workers heard around the world. Started cascading effect, encouraging agencies consider unionizing Amazon's labor practices under investigation in Washington. And I'm going to skip to econ decline. Econ decline causes great power war. That's Lou 18. The next crisis paves the way for a large-scale military conference. Crisis is closer than you think. Escalated into a major global military conflict. 08 almost made our government's economic crisis more severe because we have built up a tolerance. We were strongest macroeconomic mediation for a long distress characterized by antipathy. Foreign countries feel unrest, terrorism, or war. Problems make matter worse. The next crisis could lead to large-scale military confrontation, global conflagration, and environment. New unions because they can't stop other monopolies from blocking climate change bill. And I'm going to skip down to no extinction warming. And no extinction warming. Our evidence assumes the worst case scenario. That's Sandberg 18. Climate change in early Homo sapiens by long periods of ecological change still given human survival through these cycles. They have been insufficient to cause extinction. An increase in climate-related extremes would do localized damage despite serious local problems. Situation pose no risk of survival. Expected lifespan is the order of 2 billion years. I guess I'll go back up to the SCO salts credit scale. And SCO salts, lack of regs doesn't matter if companies are solving now. Novice 722. Council build a reputation of environmental sustainability, produce over 1 million electric cars, which permanently close to 4 million tons of CO2, facilitated powered by 50% or more renewable energy, has visited a supercharged average of over 595 gigawatt hours of energy. Company sources raw materials through an environmentally responsible, humane supply chain. Tesla has provided disaster relief assistance for forest fires throughout 2018-2019, delivered clean power solutions. Microsoft. The company plans to shift 100% renewable energy by 2025 to become by 2050 to remove all the carbon that the company has been responsible for. Plans to make the company's corporate base with 100% zero waste. Apple Innovations considered an industry leader for sustainable manufacturing. Greenpeace award Apple the label the most eco-friendly tech company in the world from 2015 to 2017. Facilities are entirely carbon neutral. iPhone final assembly facilities are committed to 2020. Okay. The credit energy.
What, could you start over with that? what's the status of your counterplan?
The conditional.
This one, cool. Can you work me through the way how the Delaware counterplan works?
Yeah, so, Delaware would, like, basically just do the plan, like, bring it to, suit in court, and then, if, like, Amazon doesn't comply, like, with, like, the union stuff, they can.
So how does that solve, so our app is to make an anti-capitalist revolution. How does one state like Delaware cause that to spill over to other states to be able to cause and solve for the entire place?
Right, so we have evidence that there's a follow-on, and in addition to that, since Delaware is in a unique position where Amazon is chartered in Delaware, if Amazon doesn't do the plan, then they will end the corporate charter, and that sets more of a precedent.
Okay, now to your midterms, DA, what's the link?
The link to the plan is, the plan anchors donors. Our short 21 card specifically says that donors have like a big financial stake in labs.
What donors? Who are these donors?
Yeah, it's like donors to a big like Democrats. So we're saying like donors, they'll stop donating to like big Democrats.
I know, but are these donors big companies? Are these donors people like Amazon? Are these donors monopolies?
No, they're just like affluent professionals. Like,
so okay, but again, how does that link to the app? How does going against Amazon decrease the amount of donors?
Right, it links to the app because you're doing big antitrust enforcement.
So you're saying Democrats are against antitrust enforcement?
No, not Democrats, they're donors.
So the donors who support Democrats, which means that they support Democrats are also Democratic. So you're saying you're saying that all Democrats are not gonna donate to Democrats because of our
We're saying the
Democrats
rich,
still want to stay rich.
yeah, they're big donors, don't like big antitrust enforcement. If we
okay,
do the plan.
you sure went Republican with that one, but okay. Now on to, so you're saying that, that currently there's not enough funding or resources for the FTC currently? So you're 100% there's no funding, there has been no funding to be able to expand their resources? That's your one guy.
Even if they expanded funding, it's still in the scope, they don't have enough funding to do the plan.
In the squad?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Now can you walk me through your other counterplan, please?
DOJ?
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing, but DOJ would bring them to court.
So what's the difference between the DOJ and the FTC?
It doesn't cost trade-off, FTC trade-off. FTC is not 3
So you're in, external links, your external net benefits for both is the FTC, correct?
For Delaware?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Okay.
And like midterms as well.
And midterms. How would it not trigger midterms?
Which one?
How would the counterplans not trigger midterms?
The counterplan not trigger, which counterplan?
Any of them.
You want me to answer?
If you want to finish it, yeah.
Well, I don't have an answer off the top of my head, so I don't know what counterplan you're talking about.
Okay.
We'll take some facts. I'm gonna go ahead and start my timer. Now.
sent you Novice. Should be set. Wait, no, it was in there. It was sent you.
Okay, stopping time. I have 4:49 used.
What did you say, 5:10 left?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm downloading and sending that.
Teamwork.
It is sent. So let me know people about it, and I'll wait for the judge to come back before I override that. That's all right. Alrighty, the doc is sent. I'm going to be going in the order of, oh, that's not the order I meant to go in, but that'll work. Starting advantage 1, labor, then moving to solvency, then advantage 2, then T, then DOJ counterclaim, then the FTC dissat, the midterms dissat, and finally the Delaware counterclaim.
Yeah, look, we're gonna have to restart that.
I'm gonna do that one more time, sorry, I was getting my clothes in order, I realized I've done it before. We're going on case, starting labor. Ooh.
Didn't expect it to make that noise.
Me either. Going labor, solvency, environment, then moving to off, going T, DOJ, FTC, midterms, Delaware. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Blue, FTC, midterm, Amazing.
Does everyone have the doc?
Yes.
Great. Alright, so response, starting with first unions guarantee companies lose profits cause economic decline, this is FT 20. In 2019, more than 2.1 million new jobs were entered the market, but the number of unionized workers fell by 170,000. The percentage of union workers were at 5.1%, 10.3%, roughly 14.6 million workers, up 141.7 Unions are not that raises people in the market, not wanting to improve the higher labor costs, higher costs of negotiating collective bargaining agreements, and higher labor market uncertainty, all undercut against union workers, and by all these non union employees, people to stakeholders, suppliers, and customers of the union strength. They also increase risk of market disruption from strike on living. Are firm bankruptcies whenever unions or employers overpay their hands in negotiations. Employers oppose unionization by any means in the law because it case for any gains for union workers come at the expense of everyone else. The only way a union can provide gains for its members is to address some fraction of the profits left from the German when they hold monopoly positions. State workforces and far more heterogeneous labor turnover is far higher. It's much more difficult for a union to organize a common front among workers with divergent interests. Employers who have much more depth of resisting unionization. There's no accident plans are built in states like Tennessee, Mississippi, and that facilities are designed in a way to make them more difficult to picket or shut down. Next, Amazon workers will battle to form the first U.S. union. This is in response to their question about the union in the squad. This shows momentum is gaining in time to support union building is national. 22 workers in the New York warehouse voted 55% in favor of joining the Amazon labor union. Victory marks a major defeat for Amazon, which has fiercely fought against unionization. Amazon's defeat by Mr. Smalls and his team support for organizers was a really big deal. Kalina David Glass started it up with the odds. Amazon will do everything it can to undo this success, to break up these workers, and to try and stop the momentum that will inevitably come from this victory. The company has put up a wall of resistance to unions since its inception. With this win, activists are hoping that the wall is about to crumble. In recent months, organizers have led successful campaigns of countries, media outlets, smaller retailers, and others. It continues to be very difficult for workers to collectively organize. Initially, union efforts at the Amazon warehouse in Alabama last year, and this is the plan of OrKa.
I'll send this over.
Also, in response, they said that our Elton 20 card, extend that again. Although it says unions are imperfect, it still says that they are necessary for an anti-capitalist revolution. They might not be perfect, but there's still something that's necessary, so we need to do something to help them, which is what the plan does. With insolvency precedents are using cases Walker 16, American court falls into doctrine of state diseases and first earlier cases and issues. Such cases are known as precedents. The Amazon cases based on the principle of state diseases and ideas like issues to be just like under state diseases. Every case with the potential of being a precedent. In some sense, the prior case must address the same legal question as applies to similar facts, but it must have been decided in court or superior court within the hierarchy which the courts consider the case belongs. The American federal court systems 3 tiers: the district court, the court of appeals, the U.S. Supreme Court. Each district must follow the precedent handed down by the Supreme Court. And again, they said that the plan does not change the consumer welfare standard. Like we've said, the plan moves away from the consumer welfare standard by making the Clayton Act more worker-focused than consumers. The consumer welfare standard itself is not in the statute, so cannot topically be changed. The plan achieves this through a topical action again, of expanding the Clayton Act, refocusing it on worker rights instead of consumer rights. Moving to environment, extend Bill 21 and UN 19 that Amazon's monopoly power allows and encourages the negative environmental impacts. Only the app solves here. Sorry, like how weirdly formatted. It causes extinction from oxygen disease, ice melt, cognitive function, COVID-19. If oceans warm, they stop plankton disrupting photosynthesis, give 2/3 of oxygen comes up, result in mass mortality. Permafrost revives Spanish flu, smallpox, and plague. As ice melt, they trigger earthquakes affecting all life. If we raise carbon, we might not think straight. Cognitive ability fails. Skills we need both. Extinction, Sprout 19. Earth is headed for another degree of more warming. Seas may rise by more than 25 meters. 35% of global land area are subject to more than 20 days of lethal heat conditions. Ecosystems collapse. Water availability decreases sharply. Ag becomes non-viable in the dry subtropics. Food production is unable to defeat the global population. A catastrophic decline in insect population before desertation and conditions too hot for human habitation. Small islands become uninhabitable. High likelihood of human civilization is coming to an end. This is a response that there is no extinction from warming. There is extinction from warming. It is the biggest impact in the round we need to be solving for warming and for the environment. It's the biggest impact. It affects everyone on the earth, and it will lead to extinction. Next, economic crisis causes increased cooperation, not war. Clary 15 provides new evidence that economic crisis is desired policies drawing data from 196 5,000 50, 67, which determine the evidence against probably the request and interest likely determined during economic downturn. There were different economic models, and this is a peace matters will come back economic troubles. Economic crisis is necessary for incent leaders to search for ways to cut defense expenditures. Economic crisis also encourage strategic reassessment by depletion, where elites attempt to deal with the seriousness of that posed by former rival. Crisis provokes elites to consider prioritization of a process that is postponed during periods of economic normalcy. Economic crisis increases the political and economic benefit through international economic cooperation, leading to foreign and enhanced trade and increased investment. Moving to T-scope, we literally expand the scope of Clayton and its application as a text of the plan and include compensation policies about the evaluation of predatory pricing. The plan expands the scope of predatory by establishing a precedent to use for e-commerce sites like Amazon. In our plans to use expanding Clayton by setting a new precedent with a low definition of antitrust law. We are establishing a new one. Please recall that antitrust law is relied on a system of precedent and exception. Setting a new one is no different than evidence that this does not expand antitrust law. We also expand the scope by targeting specific instances for remuneration to create precedent in digital commerce market without trusting judicial penalties for having acted since they've acted. Interpretation does not make correct. So expand and burden of proof dictates the scope of antitrust. That was Scott 20. Care with reliance on non-liability goals of preventing false positives become a barrier to the scope of evidence prohibited related to higher burden of proof on plaintiffs. alleging exclusionary conduct, arbitrary zero interest in scope does not involve setting any precedent. Evidence of this court, but it's not the only consideration. It's the conflict of scope, terms predictably we increase ground of links to court and two agencies moving to the DOJ CP. This also trades off with the FTC dissent that they brought up here. When the act gets challenged, it's in the federal courts, which is the same place that a DOJ counterplan would go, meaning they also link to this out here. In both cases, the plan requires the company to get challenged first in federal courts, so they have the same impacts here. Also consider this counterplan of the concept of CDAs, which we do not link to. Also kind of bad because it forces that to debate multiple words, affects 2AC answers and standby 20 hours, not real world because contradictory competing conditionality represents two opposite ways of approaching the world when you would never do that as an addict. Moving to the FTC dissent that we do not link to on FTC, the NLRB cases are already in motion. We feel the ruling resources are already allocated. Conduct already done for Amazon Consulate, 2.7 courts from the 1AC. That is the FTC laying out the case against Amazon for whatever on the drug. They also know the NLRB because the pushback on Amazon is FTC, which is why the NLRB is important because it is not all of the act is FTC. No link that FTC trades off on this issue. No link we reduce trade by creating precedent. Trade off by creating precedent. Clayton Act's leading the violations as well. Conor, you read a book saying how much power against damages used. This should have to trigger the impact when she was pointed back to the didn't even see that the internal link is so high. It doesn't exist. Or the threshold is so high that there was no way it would ever trigger the DA. They have no internal link to their impacts here. Also in the no link, antitrust is irrelevant to midterm. Sorry, this is on the wrong card. Moving to the midterms DA, but these two cards, sorry. Antitrust is irrelevant to midterm outcomes on March 21. Public is less certain about remedies. Most policy issues don't influence election outcomes. It won't affect the 2022 election. Issues of antitrust are abstract. Really hard to make it resonate, even though people think tech is too big. They love Facebook. Next, it is really politicizing the public. COVID-19. Shifting influence of antitrust when candidates to use debate only limited in how enforcement should be scaled back. Americans view corporations with satisfaction. Moving to the midterms, first on the impacts here, the environment outweighs. Cross-applying to Kevin and Pratt, the environment is the biggest, as we've outlined, environment is the biggest impact in this round. So that applies both to the FTC dissent and the midterm dissent here, in which they have cited war and war as their extinction impact. Environment is the biggest extinction impact in this round. That's where those cards should be, sorry. Moving to the Delaware counterplan. Firstly, Amazon is incorporated in Delaware currently, but it was first incorporated in Washington State, where their headquarters still are. This puts them in a unique position to easily reincorporate in Washington State, when the Delaware plan is passed or introduced, and avoid the action. Meaning they have no solvency here, and Amazon would easily be able to avoid the violations put in place by Delaware. The CP also does not guarantee federal follow-on. Only a PERM would do that. So PERM do both. Do the counterplan alongside the federal action. We can both have the state of Delaware run this as well as the federal action of the plan. This is the only and best way to do this action because the plan requires that all 50 states act equally. If we think about it, if one state has this antitrust action in which labor violations are heavily prosecuted and one state doesn't, it just means those companies are going to move to those states where the antitrust laws are less strict, and they're going to be able to continue doing these bad practices there. We need equal action in all 50 states across the federal government. Otherwise, there's no solvency here, and the atrocities continue and continue. There also is no solvency for the environmental impact here. If we only do this in Delaware, then Delaware, great, they're going to not harm the environment. We need everyone to follow here, as well as the fact that that Delaware is only one state, meaning it's going to be even easier for Amazon to lobby against this one state and to prevent this from being passed than if we were to act against all 50 states, in which it would be much harder for Amazon to lobby against the entire federal government. Sorry, there were some cards that were duplicated, but they are
okay.
In the right spot.
The midterms card, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't realize they were in both places. I thought I just put them on the wrong one.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we understand.
Okay. I'm ready for cross-eyes.
Okay. So on case, you said, economic crisis cause increased cooperation.
Yes.
So which one is it? Does economic collapse cause an anti-capitalist revolution, or does it cause cooperation between these?
Both. It causes cooperation towards an economic revolution.
Where does it say that in Clary 15?
What we're saying is that it's associated with conciliatory policies where it's not going to result in some sort of war, and that peace is going to result from economic troubles. And what we're saying is that peace is going to result when the economic system is overturned.
It says that in Clary?
Yeah, it specifically says that peace may result from economic troubles.
Yeah, but where does it say that peace is from an anti-capitalist revolution?
So it also says that economic crises encourage strategic reassessment, and then what our cards about an anti-capitalist revolution says is that we need a reassessment of our economic policies, and we need to reestablish and reinvent them. That's our Gorbach 16 card, in which it says that now is the time to reassess those economic policies and to create, or economic systems, and create something new.
Okay, so why, so like this, like, plenary part is citing like empirics of like, since like there's been like 109 like economic crises, and then like they like countries just like collaborating and causing peace after that. Why weren't they causing revolutions and not like and like instead causing collaboration and peace?
Well, this card isn't specifically saying that they weren't causing revolutions. What they're saying is that they were able to get to a point of peace, and what we're advocating for is that that point of peace is going to be a place after capitalism.
Okay, gotcha. On like Delaware, you said that Amazon would lobby. But I thought so would Amazon lobby like against the plan?
What we're saying is that it's going to be a lot harder for Amazon to lobby against the entire federal government than it is against one state of Delaware.
But do you feel that like the case wins?
Yes.
Okay. Then
because it's reasonable fiat. The Delaware counterplan does not have reasonable fiat because it would be so much lobbying and so much easier to lobby. It would be much harder for Amazon, and so we can have reasonable fiat there because the lobbying would be
You're also technically, yeah.
and also yeah, that's right.
Okay. Then on FTC, you said that, like, you said that Khan already like wrote a book saying how against Amazon he is. Why haven't the cases like already passed?
So Khan has done action against FTC already since her appointment. She hasn't done this specific action, which is why we're advocating for this specific action, but she's been setting up and going against Amazon from the beginning of her career.
Why hasn't she
From
done this
before her
specific
career.
action?
We haven't presented it to her yet.
That's not been presented?
We haven't specifically presented it to her.
Gotcha.
I don't know her. Not really.
Alright. Take a breath.
I'm going to use it back.
Okay.
Let me know when you'll have received it, and then I'll get the order.
I got it.
Alright, the order is going to be Delaware, and then the environment advantage, and then the DOJCP.
Sorry.
Okay. Delaware, C, environment, DOJ.
Perfect. That's the DOJCP, right?
Yes. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, if nobody interrupts in 5, then I'll start. Under the key to educational and conditionality, all simultaneous control and policy evaluation, pillars to fully test academic presentation, time for sugar force situates to make intelligent strategic choices and see as policy options to the negative and one and see foreclose our ability to fully test and one and see. And 2, key to fairness, counter playground, the asphalt term determinately ends on power plants being forced on conditional screws at 1 and C because the outcomes run A minutes of terms and straight terms, and B negative starting, we should be able to take counter plant out of the 2 C add-on and just key to our education concept. And 3, multiple potentially living worlds that 1 and C success but with all negative for 2 C under coverage 1 and C applications. And we took use arbitrary words to decide which one the 2 C also found to be reasonable but against the considering calculus. And all arguments are conditional, but 1 AR doesn't go for all 2 C arguments, and the calculations prevent any distinctions on every argument. And reason literature, even if you lose offensive motives, you just talk through conditionality, so some people say that conditionality. And 4, reject the argument of the 2 this is found in theory to punish the crime. Moving on to Delaware speed. Amazon's charters in Delaware submit this PDF as evidence in the debate. That's SECOO, and the CP solved the entirety of the outfall avoiding the FTC midterms because it isn't coming from Washington. Reincorporating into Washington would link to the DA. The CP opposes the plan's restrictions directly on any corporation charter in Delaware, and they'll revoke Amazon's corporate charter if they don't comply. Once CP gets modeled by states and the federal government, Delaware's corporate law is the gold standard. It's Armour 9 and 12. Delaware courts, de facto national U.S. corporate law courts, Delaware Central in U.S. law schools, commons accompanying MBCA referred to explain drafters, choices, courts, and other states' law, Delaware case law, courts and MBCA states' preference to decisions from of other MBCA states. And we saw immediately the vast majority of eviction firms are incorporated in Delaware. This shows in 15. Delaware has a substantial influence on corporate governance. 26% of all U.S. companies are incorporated in Delaware law, including 80% that incorporate outside their headquarters state, which is another 6 following Delaware jurisprudence. And Delaware's legal power is too big to fail. If Amazon lobbies against Delaware and wins, it would win against the USFG too. That's armor black, shove and swallow. Companies choose the state's corporate law will govern their amended states to attract companies to incorporate Delaware courts have signed most major corporate law to apply Delaware precedents to non-Delaware corporation courts. Delaware is a big winner. Delaware corporate law is too big to fail. And corporate flight, answer to corporate flight. This art puts the app in a double bind. If the blank triggers corporate flight, then the app can't solve because corporations flee overseas. If the app solves, then the CP solves as well. Moving on to perm. Perm is the link in 2 ways that the CP by itself avoids. First, the perm links to USFG action, CP by itself solves. Second, perm changes core antitrust law, CP changes Delaware corporate law, which means that different mechanisms talk completely. There's no benefit to perm. CP solves 100% of case immediately and model nationally, which means we get access to the entirety of case. Severance is a voter. Makes play the voting target, moving target. The perm severance is federal government, US Legal 16. The USFG is 3 branches legislature as government judiciary powers not assigned to men or to states. And the counterplay solves enough of cases and their internal links are so questionable to begin with. You must view this debate through a lens of sufficiency, otherwise the DA is inevitable, especially given 0 deficits for the 2AC. Now moving on to T. We meet, you do not extend the application of claims to enforcement, targeting integration doesn't extend scope for malicious enforcement. The 2AC3, this is incoherent at gavel. Burden of proof does not dictate scope, that's what happened after the laws were passed. We were talking about expanding the scope of what the law covers. And for arbitrary, no, not arbitrary, you have the intent to define scope. You turn predictability because you have no way to predict your app. And on top of all affirmative must remove statutory digital exemption and antitrust law, adding a new legal standard that means scope only removing a digital or statutory exemption. 16. In the absence of exemption, antitrust law applied to exchange explicit scope. Exemptions that we should have either regulation or antitrust. And since her provide both predictable limits and stable NIGRA, exemptions of data purposes to be controversies that unions is locked in, include cases like lobbying, insurance, labor unions, agriculture, and split industry belief like dating out for specific companies and applying randomly tests. And we'll enter the following cases in the debate. Our evidence is comprehensive, even exhausted. Not all of these are private, but 30 statutory and 3 judicial exemptions are plenty of background. It's like these 14. Yeah, so you can read those exemptions yourself. Any topic around changing standards, precious limits, and issue of new standards within debates of literature. There are dozens of standards that already exist and have multiple goals. There's hundreds of permutations by 15. Most adopt laws with more than one objective, looking at the 50 countries that have principal objectives. Some pursue those frequently mentioned: freedom, trade, innovation, regional integration, employment, entrepreneurs, ownership, countries clearly spell out progress and development. And we'll enter the table listing in all these objectives for further evidence as week 15. But the fact that the applicant created new standards makes it worse. Here's a list from one group of performance scholars. That's Blue 19, democratic checks, fair competition, excessive concentration, vertical presumption, Trinko doctrine, group test, Weyerhaeuser test, the Berkeley photo standard, essential factor facilities doctrine, structural presumption, link doctrine, First Amendment defense worker exception. And there's an infinite set of new legal tests. Scholars can constantly generate new ways to slice the legal pie. This causes endless debate that negative cannot be compared with OrKa 88. Without definitive scientific answers, economics must produce conflicting theories of choice between the judgment call, force or rely on individual judgments, judgment will differently, making consistent doctrine impossible both in the record of federal courts and social choice theory. There, this endless debate over antitrust rules that cannot definitely be covered, and the result is debilitating uncertainty. And on ground, under any interpretation, dissents are dead. Antitrust activities constant stats put FTC, DOJ, and central orders and state voltage. This made this argument on the DA flow that exemptions are incredibly stable. The partial overturn of the Carey and Fort Ferguson is the only action taken in decades. Statutory exemption is still in place yet, despite widespread changes in economic theory, market structures, and antitrust law in general. Moreover, their intent makes all negative ground probabilistic. Their prohibitions are generally cultivated by courts, which questions all stable uniqueness in dissect ground. That's FX topical, which independently unlimits and makes stable uniqueness in dissect ground impossible. Further, a topic based on removing an exemption guarantees good negative ground all after grounding historical controversy and reflect real-world application of antitrust law, guaranteeing negative case base. Also, note that their offense applies our interpretation sets the floor for the debate, but ceiling goes higher than removing the floor gives the out. That's above the world. It also means that you have jurisdiction to vote for them because they don't get at least it's OEDT. Modifying the statement indicating that the amount is small and invisible. And answer the counter interpretation applied the overview to their counter interpretation. They meet the counter into the ceiling to our standards. Also, their interpretation is not exclusive with ours, which may be excluded limit by adding their types of algebras or removing exceptions. Under limiting makes preparation impossible. Also, better consent topic for forcing us to distinct generic and unique ground for both such a case and particularly this out to their answer. All their reasons to prefer our interpretation more predictable with case you actualizing offense. Our interpretation keys electric release we have no way to predict their app, which kills their threat. Now moving on to environment. No uniqueness because we plan all of your 6 Amazon, but the other countries are engaging in error behavior all the time. There are million evidences, Apple, Microsoft, Disney, and this isn't including other huge companies in other countries that aren't beholden to U.S. antitrust law. Extend Novice 12, school companies are working on more sustainable industry methods and switching to renewable, eco-friendly energy. And no warming impact, their predictions are wrong and attitude installed. As CAS 17, IPCC represents gold standard investigators, little resemblance to post-apocalyptic predictions of the behind and the impact will be no worse than land use changes of life already subject to the economy continues to grow. The climate affected all of 2105 is much wealthier than 2100, facing no climate change. Impacts over the next 100 years look similar to civilization our plan successfully modeled. These are not existential. Forecast effects depends on the casual steps between phenomena, worst cases, one can event scenario, a specific become hazy. More extreme scenarios requires longer timescales for the dominant threat. After centuries, tech innovation rendered the threat irrelevant. And several countries failed to recommit to the Paris Agreement or make less ambitious promises, making the 2-degree threshold impossible to still liquefy 5. We are still expected to experience a planetary temperature increase of 2.4 degrees even though the US. The planet is still going to get warmer, even 100 promising to net zero by mid-centuries, and 73% of global greenhouse gas emissions accounted for. Countries like Australia, Mexico, Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia have failed to sign the Paris Agreement. And carbon emissions need to shrink 10 times faster to reach the 2C goal, yet global emissions are increasing. That's look for 3. 64 countries cut their emissions, but their rate of reduction needs to increase tenfold to tackle climate change. Emissions reduction needs to be roughly 10 times that amount to hold below 2 degrees Celsius. Emissions increase in 150 countries globally. Emissions grew at 240 million tons. Emissions are still increasing in way too many countries. Skip the next card and move on to the DOJ-CP. We literally don't trade off the FTC because we'd be pulling from the DOJ's resources. Like, that's how it works. DOJ does the investigations that they can prosecute without having to involve the federal court. No solvency deficit on the DOJ-CP means that we solved the entire case. We solved Amazon unions and the environment behind the DOJ cases. They said trade-off, we have no ed. They have no ed means DOJ can solve case. No link to the DA because it's not the FTC. Law enforcement detention is COVID 3. DOJ resorted frequently to wiretapping surveillance brought in group with law enforcement. These increased likelihood of risk by competitors coordinating would be detected and informed. COVID 3. DOJ leniency providing consensus to inform about collusion, strengthening detection and sanctions yield major enforcement breakthroughs. And flexible resolution cause alternative to full blocks. COVID 3. The Asian saw gave DOJ greater possibilities of negotiation and resolution of competitive problems like shorter blocking entire transactions. Answer to the perm. They didn't make a perm, so don't let them read one of the 1 and R. But the perm links to the FTC trade-off DA in case just preempting. Now going back to the environment advantage, last card. Even if the U.S. managed to cut its emissions, the EU and China must reduce their emissions to achieve significant progress. Verdict 326. U.S. comprises 15% of worldwide emissions, while China is about 30%. European Union over 50%. Even if the U.S. were to go to zero tomorrow, we would still have a massive climate crisis. Yeah, I'll see my time there.
Okay. So starting with conditionality on the counterplan here, we said that climate is good. With dispositionality, is there a reason your counterplans can't be dispositional?
Well, we wouldn't want to be dispositional because we would want to test the app in multiple worlds to get to really see if it would work and be effective and be actually good for the world.
So why can't a dispositional counterplan do that?
Because if your app triggers,
We still want to be able to run multiple counter plans, even if you don't have any offense against them.
Yeah, but if it's dispositional, could you not run multiple dispositional counterplans?
That means that they would be unconditional if there was no offense against them, and we think that's bad because we like that.
It wouldn't be unconditional; it would be dispositional. But that's okay. Okay.
That's what dispositional somebody is.
So moving specifically to the Delaware counterplan, you said that if Amazon reincorporated to Washington State, this would trigger the DA. What do you mean by that? What DA would it trigger?
it would trigger the FTC DA because Washington uses federal resources. Delaware uses its own state court resources.
Okay,
So if you're using federal resources, it's
To
constitutional.
clarify, Washington State or Washington DC?
Washington DC.
Okay, so we said Washington State to clarify. So if they reincorporated to Washington State, would that trigger the D stats?
We feel no.
They literally wouldn't reincorporate into Washington State because Washington State isn't a tax haven.
No, not even. It's not even that. It's we read that they won't reincorporate, and that also the state of Delaware can stop them from reincorporating.
Okay. How can the state of Delaware stop them?
They can just ban them from reincorporating for 3 years. A, we feel that. B, we read that on that.
Where did you read the it's supposed to be?
And the 1 and C.
The 1 and C.
And then finally, moving to environment. Sorry, so you, oh my gosh, where'd it go? That the plan only restricts Amazon. So
Wait,
if we restrict more than Amazon, does that mean that we solve environment?
No, not necessarily, because there is no warming impact, first off, and even if you stop all the carbon emissions of U.S. companies, you can't count for all of the other countries and all the other companies in other countries. You can't use U.S. antitrust law and apply it to
Okay.
them.
So,
wait, so the whole fiat thing, was that a verbal analytic?
It was the third plank on the CEDA.
Because I just controlled F and then.
It said block, it's like block green corporation
For up to
for
3
like
years.
up to 3 years.
okay, that's, well, I got 2 more seconds, I'll keep talking, and that's it.
Okay, I'm sending out E1 and R. So the order will be midterms DA, FTC DA. Let me get and then observation 1, and labor. Is your room ready? First on the midterms DA, we can see the antitrust is irrelevant to the midterms. We're kicking it, moving on to the FTCDA. Double line, they said the NLRB cases are in motion, but they said they haven't been introduced in cross-ex, means cases aren't in motion, or if they are, the status quo stalls. And we don't ignore the NLRB plank. They said they combine all the cases, which means the FTC takes all the cases, and even if they don't, prosecuting one case takes up a ton of resources for the world to work in the link debate. And no concept where they have no M, and just writing a book doesn't mean the impact should have happened, and that's the only thing they cite. Or they don't cite anything, that's the only thing they say. And they said no warrant for internal link, but there's, no warrant for that, and I'll go over the link story later. And war turns the environment, nukes kill all wildlife, plants for entire countries, magnifies their impact, and makes it happen faster. And right now, warming is at 50 to 100 years. You also read a bunch of warming defense on case, but war happens right now. FTC would immediately drop the case, cause the impacts of the plan. And with overview, FTC is focusing on global investigations now to coordinate actions. The plan trades off the birth of the FTC such that they can handle the app turns app scenario and solvency. 1, turf wars. FTC's power hungry, they'll attempt to assert the app. The time in COVID-20. FTC and DOJ share the authority. This created conflicts. Agencies devising rural methods to avoid duplicated inquiries arrangement, avoid conflicts. After corporate government, the DOJ has ordered review social media that under earlier agreements to buy FTC claim dumping high tensions and triggers the link. Vinberg and Lapowski 20. FTC and DOJ acknowledge squabbles over jurisdictions. South about model efficiency. You'd hope they're not looking at the same thing. And optics. DOJ exclusively looks at the FTC advocating actually, let's get that to the impact. And on impact, it's most likely for scenario for war. Spark nuke escalation in Asia and Middle East. It's COVID-19. 15 maintains stabilization and nuclear winter. That's dangerous increase under stress. Nothing can be rolled out. With food under stress, nothing can be rolled out. Chemical weapons in Syria had hunger among early drivers. Nuclear conflict remains possibility. South Asia, Middle East, stress in food and firefighters multiplying, panicking regimes in Russia, U.S. or France deploy atomic weapons to quell refugees fleeing famine. Food insecurities, most likely scenario for termination of species. And legal in turns case, Syrian enforcement and encouraging anti-competitive behavior. That's bigger than all 20. Agencies lack resources to film measures. They've seen photos frozen. Increasing resources is important. Agencies require increase to begin deterring conduct. Agencies trapped are less likely to investigate and willing to accept flawed settlements. Corporations likely to pursue murders and any kind of conduct they think agencies will cause to bring antitrust. And on uniqueness, it's top of the docket. Go 21. FTC voting unanimously to enforce rights to repair FTC's endorsement. Not surprised the issue has been bipartisan. 5-0 vote signals commitment to enforce enforce antitrust law on consumers. FTC create rules that will prevent restricting repair and prioritize by FTC enforcement. Another 21. Combination of the FTC and Biden orders put emphasis on right to repair enforcement is a priority, both of antitrust and consumer protection. And right to repair will be enforced now. The FTC is implementing executive rulemaking that calls for increased resources and prioritizes litigating resources in the manufacturing sector. Let's mentor. And the rolling out enforcement is a priority and will solve innovation. That's according to 21. Americans will be free to repair under changes by regulators. FTC is writing rules targeting restrictions to 5 unanimously adopted policies supporting right to repair launches, speeds up enforcement, and open the way regulations. These restrictions raise costs, cycle innovation, close business, undermine resiliency. FTC tools it can use to root out restrictions, commit with bigger policy commits to prosecute restrictions that violate antitrust with unanimous support. There's a new sheriff. The FTC is ready to act to stop schemes to undermine repair, and they're litigating non-compliance, drawing on resources throughout the agency. The FTC 21. Commission devote resources will prioritize investigations into repair restrictions under statutes to aid in enforcement. Commission will file suit against violators to seek release. Commission will scrutinize restrictions for violation of antitrust using resources and expertise throughout the agency. FTC coordinates to ensure compliance and update law to advance repair markets. And right to repair will be enforced now, probably 21. FTC voted to push harder for right to repair. All 5 voted to explore antitrust protection laws that will enforcement FTC tools to root out repair restrictions, commit to move forward with bigger. Commission's prioritize initiatives to crack down on companies equipment repair by third party single platforming. The 3-footer movement has been pushing to tackle behavior. And on the link. Having a single case takes up 50% of resources. There's been a slack now. Congress will deny requests. It's Kendrick's 20. We get 50 people, that's lawyers everyone. If they bring in cases to have the resources to litigation, took up everyone's time. Budget, we barely increase lawyers in winter and budgets live in heads. They can make every maneuver. They don't win. Half of those suck up resources. Staffers driven, but tech giants poaching from Washington store. Congress responsible for funding and lack of actions makes questioning hollow. And litigation snowballs, dragging the FTC into a protracted legal and hiring fight. Part 21. Agency has seen its budget increase, mergers regularly require more resources, and staff murders require investigation into dozens of markets. Commissioners identify experts to carry out litigation. The money the FTC spends on experts has risen. Investigations become complex, necessitating funding for hiring. The FTC is known for an aversion to litigation, forced to expend viewers crushed under a caseload. And they read no impact use, so that means you this 100% risk of our impact causing extinction. And on, I'm going to skip down to the econ decline cards, sentiment pop-up on case on labor. Decline costs war overcomes traditional barriers from like Sunder and pop-up 19. Financial crisis growing concerned by the increased possibility of large-scale military conflict. Prolonged crisis could easily spin out of control, morph into military conflict, World War. Oh wait, almost make private governments, policymakers, manage the world. Economic turn frame, quantitative easing, and low interest rates. Another crisis more severe than the last is likely another round of economic stress formed, unrest, conflict, even war, and security increased social turmoil, especially among the growing precariat and others who feel vulnerable or threatened at the populace. Nationalism may exacerbate tensions leading to conflict. Leaders reverse policies associated with crisis, global liberalization, economic conflicts, or financial crisis lead to military conflict and even unintended. And data proves the link between economic decline and war. Black tea and Lazarus 21. Link between financial crisis and deterioration and peace have been highlighted by several studies. More and more data reveals correlation between crisis and wars. Economic starts the link between financial crisis, social philosophy, growing economic crisis caused global conflict, raised concerns regarding a provision of the 1930s which led to World War II. Dangerous link between the global economy and peace has come to the force. I think it's I think I'm good.
We have 5 seconds, right? Setting it up. Yeah. So there's T, labor, environment, CP. We need other CP. Instead, we need especially dependent of definition. We ban Amazon from leveraging cross-sector advantage of vertical integration and predatory pricing. Extend counter interpretation. Brandon approved to take the scope of an antitrust. The prescribed care was a combination of great economics, sophistication, reliance, bright rules, and accountability. Alexis reliance, the influence of the person, and the analysis of particular practices. The goal of preventing the Functional limit sex abuse. We have a large enough limit base that cut a 9-minute or 1 AC a year's worth of 2 AC blacks and atoms. That means that there will be inevitably a reasonable substantial amount of reciprocal literature. Don't punish us because they didn't get into the literature. This is especially true with our app. I could read you unions bad, cap good, politics. Extend reasonability. Amazon is core of the top. Is core of topical and was the most predictable apps going into this year. We use core in the plan expands the scope of antitrust by extending precedent to use e-commerce giants like Amazon. Our new precedent setting approves we expand the scope, therefore are reasonably topical. This is semis at CEDA. We have maybe one more debate at the round of the year, which means that the debate isn't about modules or topic, it is about whether we made the debate uniquely impossible to be named. We didn't. They don't have any offense that is specific to this round or our app. It is only about our interpretation being bad for the year's worth of debate, which is non-unique. Extend the term of antitrust. Antitrust is part of the core antitrust, which is the term of meant to be interpreted as not temporarily precedent is therefore included. Proving the interpretation arbitrary, zero evidence. It says the scope does not involve setting a new precedent. There evidence says it's core, but that's the only consideration and considering that scope of predictability. Now on to case for labor. The only thing that they keep on saying is that the decline in the econ will lead to war. However, they did not address our Clary 15 card, which means that they completely concede to the fact that if there is an economic crisis and the economy is to go down, that would in fact not lead to war, but lead to a cooperation, and that cooperation will be used to be able to go against monopolies and other big companies for our anti-capitalist revolution. So the fact that they conceded this, every single one of their arguments where they keep saying that we link to the decline of war, it's should not be flown at all, for they conceded to the fact that the decrease of econ does not lead to war, it leads to cooperation. Now onto the environment. Extend our COVID-19 card that it causes extinction from oxygen, disease, ice melts, cognitive failure. All these things are happening in the status quo now. We can see that extinction is happening with other different kinds of animals, but it's the fact that it's continuing to get worse, and these big companies are lobbying against any impactful climate change bills. And then extend our Sprite 19 card that it will, again, that it reaffirms that it will lead to extinction. Other card says that that this is just an imaginative thing that will not lead to extinction. However, that no warm impact. And they said that we don't target these big companies that will specifically go against climate change. However, yes, we do. Amazon, Apple, Google, all these things. Well, they will be set under the precedent that we're saying that we are trying to stay, and these unions will be able to decrease the economy, make these companies weaker, so that they will not be able to continue to lobby against any climate change bills. So yes, in this debate, extinction is the biggest impact, and we completely solve for that. Now on to FTC. The cases are in motion. The LRB, they do not combine into one. Khan is already gunning for Amazon. As we stated, Khan is the current director of the FTC, so it's the fact that they're already going for Amazon. So they're already focusing on Amazon. They're trying to make these arguments about the right to repair. However, if the fact that they're already going for Amazon and what the plan does is to continue with just a different direction, how they go for Amazon, then there is no link here at all. For they're saying that if they could bring in new cases, or if the fact that they changed their direction from the right to repair onto Amazon, that will live to their impact. But again, they don't address the fact that the director of the FTC is already going for Amazon. So if that's the case, their impacts will already happen. So there's no link. We reduce it, so there's no link. There's no we are not reducing the trade-off. Khan has already wrote a book about it. She says how she's going to target it. She is targeting it now. So again, there is no impacts, and if there was in the status quo, the impacts would already happen. Now onto Delaware. Again, Purdue built the reason Amazon can't reincorporate the Washington state because they already have before they decided Delaware's restriction outweighs the taxes from Washington. The neg has extended the reason, and Amazon, they have also said that Amazon recorp of the trigger the DA, as we said, the CP would cause Amazon reincorporation. The CP links to the DA, and again, cross-apply FTC DA answers, which again takes out their only net benefit. And we said Purdue Belt, so we compared Purdue Belt with the Delaware, and now on to the DOJ. The both the federal courts of the action, the DOJ action to mean the violations go through the federal courts, and any sort of FTC action, meaning the FTC in the same level of trade-off, so no reason to prefer the DOJ CP. Again, so this would link to the FTC because any kind of antitrust actions doesn't go specifically just to the DOJ, or doesn't go specifically through the FTC. They combine forces to be able to enact these antitrust laws, so it doesn't matter if antitrust laws are going through the DOJ, it's going to need the help of the FTC, which automatically links to the links to their FTC DA, which is why we didn't win a permit. Again, they try to hit us with the permit, but again, we can perm the Delaware, the DOJ links to their benefit.
Four, well, prop blocks, so let me see that up. No, room. Okay, we're gonna start now.
So the order is going to be FTC and
No, that's not true.
oh, okay.
Delaware,
Okay, yeah, Delaware.
then DOJ. DOJ, FTC.
Okay, yeah, DOJ, FTC. And then case will be in there somewhere.
No, you can just put it at the bottom. You can just put environment at the bottom.
Alright. Ready? Time starts now. Judges, you're gonna vote on the FTC and DOJ counterclaim because they trigger because the app triggers food wars and famine, and the DOJ avoids this entirely by using its own resources. Now going on to impact calculus. You're gonna prefer our impact of food wars because it outweighs on time frame, magnitude, and probability. Global warming has no impact, we're adaptable. That was CAS 17, and even if it did, the plan can't solve because other countries like Russia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, who didn't re-sign the Paris Agreement, are still contributing to the world's emissions. So solving a 2.4 degree increase in temp is impossible, as well as China and the EU, which make up 80% of all emissions. That was Butcher card. So even if all of the US emissions went to zero, carbon emissions still need to shrink 10 times faster in order to prevent a hypothetical warming impact. And even if you don't buy that, their plan directly causes econ decline, which triggers a nuclear war and worsens their impact of pollution and disease. Our food wars impact outweighs because it happens immediately and causes millions of deaths from famine, as well as resource wars that are triggered because of starvation. Now moving on to the Delaware, we can see that Amazon will reincorporate to Washington State on DOJ. DOJ solves 100% of the case because there's no solvency deficits in the 1AR. They say it will link to the DA, but there's no link. DOJ doesn't get involved. They only fee out the FTC, and this is a new arg in the 1AR, so don't evaluate it. And even if you buy that the DOJ has resources and the FTC doesn't, that's not important for the debate. Even if cases are in motion, they still take up resources for prosecution. So even 1% chance that they trigger the DA, you vote next. We literally don't trade off with FTC because we'd be pulling from the DOJ's resources. Like, that's literally how it works. DOJ does the investigations and they can prosecute without having to involve the federal court. There's no solvency deficit on DOJ CP, which means that we solve the entire case. We solve Amazon unions and the environment by having the DOJ take the cases. They said trade off, but they have no evidence. Means that DOJ can solve the case, no link to the DA because it's not the FTC. They were like, oh yeah, every antitrust, like when you enact antitrust law, you need the FTC and the DOJ to work together, but their plain text doesn't even say that they use both the FTC and the DOJ, so they literally cannot have a viable perm. That would be perm severance, except that.
Although it's new, also it's new.
Yeah, that was, the perm was new as well. Also,
No, the perm was abandoned perm. The perm, there's no perm, the other arg was new.
Okay, whatever, and except the perm severance argument that they're like severing out of their plan text because they're trying to include that DOJ.
It didn't perm.
Anyway, yeah, so no perm, don't let them permit in the last speech. And on FTC, the FTC, they said that Amazon is a top priority, but they literally have no F for this. All they said that is Alina Khan wrote a book, but that has nothing to do with actual enforcement. Even if it was a top priority, it shows that the status quo is already solving. The plan does nothing. They have no link argument other than this, but we already proved that one singular case takes 50% of resources, which they did not contest. And also, extended double bind, they said NLRB cases are in motion, but they said that they haven't been introduced in cross-ex. It means that cases aren't in motion, or if they are, this won't solve. And there's no concept, or they have no evidence, and they're just writing a book doesn't mean that the impact should happen. There's no war for the internal link. I'll go over the link story. So they're like enacting right to repair right now, and the plan takes away vital resources towards Amazon that they need to actually put in right to repair. And if they don't focus on right to repair now, that leads to widespread famine because the U.S. can't use the technology to make food and distribute it to other countries. That causes famine, that causes resource wars because nobody has food to eat. War turns the environment. Nukes will kill all wildlife, plants for entire countries. This magnifies their impact 100-fold. And war happens faster. Warming is in 50 to 100 years, and we already established the break they can't solve. War happens now. The FTC would immediately drop case. So now moving on to case. So on labor, we did not concede the Clary card. We extend Sunderum. Decline causes war, overcome traditional barriers. Use your common sense. Countries won't stop cooperating. They'll fight with each other to keep their resources and their money. We have a card that says exactly this, Leticia and Lazaro 21, that says decline will in fact exacerbate national tensions because they're still going to want to fight each other in order to stay at the top and in order to support their own citizens. And also, they're talking about how it'll spill out to other companies because they're going to set a precedent. But even if they set a precedent within the United States and the United States emissions go to zero, that still doesn't account for all of the other countries, all of the other companies in other countries that are huge, like Samsung, Chinese companies that contribute to emissions way more, and they can't solve for the emissions of other countries, and therefore they cannot stop global warming. And then on FTC uniqueness. It's the top of the docket. They didn't contest our good evidence. The FTC voted unanimously to enforce right to repair. A right to repair will be enforced now. The FTC is implementing executive rulemaking that calls for increased resources and prioritizes litigating restrictions in the manufacturing sector. That's midterm. And they're rolling out enforcement into priority and will solve innovation. That's Gordon 21. However, if you do the plan that expends vital resources needed to delegate towards right to repair towards Amazon, something that CON is apparently already working on, like they said, within the school. So it's either that the school automatically solves or more resources are delegated to the FTC to counter Amazon, and this triggers the link and leads to the FTC not being able to enforce right to repair, leads to famine, resource wars, exacerbates their impacts. It's the most likely scenario for war, sparks nuke escalation in Asia and the Middle East. That was COVID-19. Nuclear winter elevates the environment. Chemical weapons cause migration and famine. That's great. Yeah. So for all of those reasons, you should feel very comfortable voting on CP. Frame it in sufficiency framing. We solved better than the app ever could.
Yeah, 112 left.
Ready?
No, wait, order.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Is that good point. I'm going to be starting on case, going labor, and then environment, then moving to DOJ and FTC, and a little bit of conduct. Oh, timer. Alrighty, first to frame this debate to you, here is why we are winning as the app. We are winning because we do not link to the FTC DA, which is the only remaining DA. We are also winning on the counter plan because it triggers the DA and solves worse. In this round, we are testing whether the plan is effective and does more net good or net bad. The plan clearly does more net good in this round than it does net bad. We've outlined in this round specifically that the biggest impact is the environment. We're the only ones who can effectively solve for it. Senator McKibben and Spratt cards, we sent it through the round. They explain how climate change will lead to extinction if it is not addressed. Even if there's a 1% risk of our impact happening, we completely outweigh. Even if there's 1% risk of our impact happening, you vote out. Moving to labor specifically, we solve labor rights abuses through unions and a push away from capitalism. Unions are needed to dismantle capitalism, and while they are not the only thing needed, they are still necessary. And in this world, unions are increasingly difficult to form. in the school, yes, the unions are increasingly difficult to form, which is why we need the action of the act to allow these unions. The NEC has not contested at all that we need to be solving these labor rights abuses. This is another impact in this round. Even if we've not outlined it as the most important impact, it is another impact. It is another net good we do, and the act has NEC has no solvency to that. Only the act has the solvency there. Moving to environment, we have framed environment again as the biggest impact. In this debate, they have said that even if the U.S. sets precedent, this does not stop other countries from polluting. But like we have said in our evidence, even in our own evidence, we don't need to completely reach zero carbon emissions across all countries in order to start reducing climate change and start saving the environment. All we need to do is start reducing them. We need to substantially reduce them, is what we have said throughout this round. And if the U.S. is able to set this precedent and is able to take this action, it will lead to a reduction in all of these harmful things towards the environment, which is why we need to enact the plan. Moving to the DOJ, they're misunderstanding both how the plan and the counter plan work here. They say that the DOJ does not trade off with the FTC since the DOJ takes the cases and not federal court. But firstly, they have provided no reason why it is bad for federal courts to take the cases. They've only said why it is bad for the FTC to take the cases here. For the FTC to take the cases here. And once again, these plans are effectively the same. The case only starts with one federal court case in the beginning, then it goes through the same mechanisms and eventually ends up in the FTC the same way the DOJ would. The DOJ may initially do these cases, but then eventually it would still end up in the FTC, meaning this plan still links their FTC decide, and further than that, we don't link to the FTC decide because Amazon is a top priority by the FTC. Their rate settings are resources. Khan is going to go through this. She's going after this. She's already been starting to do this, and although she's been starting to do this, she hasn't been able to reach this action yet, which is why further action is needed. That's why this quote is not solved. They say that we have a double bind because of the NLRB cases and whether or not they are in motion. The NLRB cases are in motion in the NLRB. What we are doing is taking those and bringing them to a federal court and getting a ruling there. That is where they're not yet in motion. That is why we're not a double bind. They said the plan takes away resources from right to repair, and that it leads to war. But again, war is the least likely impact here. The most likely and most important impact in this round is the environment. They said that war turns environment, but that environment is going to happen like 50 or 100 years down the line. It's not. It's going to happen now. We have only like about 7 years left until we reach that point of no return. Environment is happening now. It's an immediate impact, which is why we need to solve now. Sure, war can turn the environment. We also can't have a war if we're all dead because the environment completely collapsed. War does not happen faster, the environment does. And then moving to Kono, in round of abuse answers, this is especially present in the environmental debate. They've made us debate in two worlds. They said that the environment doesn't need to be solved, but yet that they solve better. They've also, my partner was barely able to extend Kono 1AR because he had no time at all to read because of the multiple CPs they ran plus the DA. So this proves the result that this is abusive to have multiple conditional positions. They've read CPs and topicalities to later drop them, overloading the 1AR with no time, as they have 15 minutes of speech time to overload the act and leave things undercovered. Once again, the impacts we run on this limits ability to make strategic concessions, stifles critical thinking, forces us to answer every position as if it were unrelated to the rest of the debate, can't allocate time properly to a CEDA make offense, infinitely regressive, allowing even one conditional CP makes it possible for multiple words that the act can never answer, kills fairness. They can't win any offense, reasons why conduct is good, dispose solves, preserve testing, best policy option, and net ground. Fairness is a prerequisite to education. Time and equity to make this discussion impossible. Reject the team. They justified a world with the negatives on hundreds of debates, killing fairness in education. So moving back here, once again, we're winning because we solve for the labor, we solve for the environment. We don't link to the FTC just now because resources are already allocated. Like we have said, Khan has already been gunning for this. She's been going for this. We know that this is an expectation that she's had. If there was going to be any sort of trade-off, it would have happened in any of those other cases that she has gone against Amazon. It would have already happened. So like we said, either there is no internal link or the threshold is so high that enacting the plan will not cause that internal link. And because we do not link to the FTC, just said there is no reason to prefer the DOJ counterplan because not only does the DOJ counterplan not solve as well, it also links the FTC dissent, and because we do not link, there's no reason to prefer a counterplan. And finally, just a summary of Kondo. Again, Kondo, we weren't able to cover as many arguments as we'd like to because of the conditionality of their counterplans, and then they went ahead and dropped them all in the two and R, leaving us very little time to cover them in the 1AR, very little to extend in the 2AR. This is in-round abuse that we said would happen, and that are the impacts. This is a voting issue. It's worse for topic education. We want to promote good debate here. This is something that's going to carry on to future years, and we want better debates. Thank you. Good debate.